Hello, everyone, and welcome to our brand new webinar, our new lesson series, Color Codes Basic Training. My name is Tara, and I am an education coordinator here at Ozobot.
I'm Cassandra, and I'm an education curriculum specialist. I make lessons.
Yay! So the first thing that we want to do really quickly is just make sure that everybody can hear and see us all right. So there is a little section on your control panel that says questions. If you could go ahead and just type in there, yes, then we'll know that you can hear and see us all. Okay, perfect. I see the yeses coming through. All right, so now that you know where that questions panel is, that is the section that you'll be going to at the end of the webinar when we're done presenting. And if you had any questions during the webinar, you'll go ahead and type them in that little box and press send. And then we'll read them out loud and answer all your questions for you. So you can hear other educators' questions, your questions will be answered, but we do ask that you hold all questions that you have to the very end, just because we aren't able to see that little tiny box while we're presenting. So we always just like to hold off. So if you're typing in their questions and we're ignoring you, it's just because we're not looking at it just yet. We'll get to it at the very end. Okay. So one other thing that I want to go over or do really fast is a quick poll just to see how many of you are currently using Ozobot in the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up right now. And then if you could just put in your answer. So again, it's how are you currently using Ozobot with your students? And then you can either choose yes, no, we have Ozobots but have not used them yet, or no, we don't have any Ozobots yet, and you might possibly be looking to purchase them, and that's why you're on this webinar. So I'll give just a few more seconds so that everybody can get in their answers. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results with everybody. So it looks like 83% of you are using Ozobot. That's great. 10% of you have them but are not using them, and then 7% don't have them just yet. So that's perfect. You are all very welcome on this webinar. And we'll have a lot of information to go over for you regarding the color code basic training. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. And the first thing that I'm going to do is show you a brief overview of how you would actually use the Ozobot with the markers and the paper portion. It's important to know that there are two different ways to program Ozobot. The first is with the markers and the paper, and then the second is with Ozoblockly. We're not going to go over Ozoblockly at all in this lesson or this session. That will be in a different webinar, so make sure that you look out for an email going out within the next month about that webinar as well. We'll have another new training on just Ozoblockly, which will be really exciting. But today we're just going to focus on markers and paper. So I'm going to move my camera down so that you'll be able to see. I'm using a big piece of butcher paper right here. But you don't have to use butcher paper. You can use computer paper, you can use poster board. It's not paper specific. You just want to make sure that you're using a white paper. You can't use it on colored construction paper just because Ozobot reads different colors, so it will start to wander all over the paper if it sees a color. Now we do have our Ozobot markers right here, and you'll see that these are our own markers that we've created. You don't have to use our markers. It's not marker specific. We also use Sharpies, we use Crayolas. We just create ours out of convenience for you so that you can get the Ozobots and the markers at the same time. It is very important to know that with some markers, the blues and greens are a little too dark. So the regular Sharpie, for example, the blue and green, the Ozobot reads it as more of a black than a blue or a green because they're too dark. So if you use a pastel blue or green, then it works a lot better. So that's a good thing to note if you find that you're using another brand of marker and that blue isn't working specifically, then try moving to a pastel color. But again, you don't have to use ours at all. So the first thing that I want to do when I am going to start using my Ozobot with markers and papers, I want to calibrate the Ozobot to the specific paper that I'm using and also the colored markers that I'm using. So I'm just going to take my black marker and I'm going to draw a circle a little bit bigger than my Ozobot would be. And then I'm going to test it and see. Okay, so my Ozobot is a little bit bigger than or smaller than the circle. And then to calibrate my Ozobot, I am going to find the power button, which is located on the side of the robot right next to that little yellow dot you see. And I'm going to hold down on that power button until I see a white light flash. Once that white light flashes, I'm going to let go of my power button and then set the Ozobot right in the middle of that black dot that I just created. Oops, let me do it one more time for you. Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go. All right, so it's going to do a little circle, spin around, move up, and then turn green. The little light at the top flash green. That means that it was properly calibrated. If it flashes red, it means that it didn't properly calibrate. So go ahead and just repeat that process one more time. So mine's good to go now. And I'm going to go ahead and take my black marker and I'm going to draw just the black lines that you can see. I'm going to turn on my Ozobot with that same little power button that I pressed earlier. So my Ozobot is now moving forward. So that's how I'm going to start my Ozobot to just kind of like keep moving and going in one direction. All I have to do is draw a simple black line. Now, if I can use other colors as well. So I'm going to use a blue line. Let's see. And then a green. And then I'm going to end in red. I'm going to go ahead and set my Ozobot on this line. And you'll notice that on the blue line, the Ozobot turns blue. On the green, it turns green. And on the red line, it turned red. Now that's because at the bottom of the Ozobot, it has optical sensors that allows it to see the different colors. So now, because it can recognize these different colors, we've created a series of color codes, just like these right here. And each color code tells the Ozobot to do a different command. So you'll see this slow code right here. If I draw red, black, red, that means it's slow. So the Ozobot will slow down. Here is a turbo code. If I draw blue, green, blue, then the Ozobot is going to speed up. It's going to go at a turbo speed. I've already drawn a code, and let me scooch my computer up a little bit so you can see it a little better. So this right here is one of the students' favorite codes. It's actually the tornado code, or backwards a spin code. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my Ozobot, set it down, and watch it go over that code and see what it does. So that was a spin code. And then backwards, the red, green is actually going to tell it to do a tornado code. Perfect. So that's how you would draw code within the lines. It's important to also note that a color code can only be placed between a black line. If you try doing color code on a colored line, like this line that I drew here, then it won't read it, just because it needs to know that specific color sequence that's associated with that command. So that's how easy it is to create these different color codes and draw these lines for the Ozobots. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys where you can find the color code guide that I just showed you right here. So this lists all the different color codes that the Ozobot is pre-programmed to recognize. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now and then take off my webcam. So I'm going to go here at the top to ozobot.com. And then I am going to click on the Educators section right here at the very top. And I'm going to scroll down to this quick start guide right here. And then scroll down just a little bit more. And here's where you're going to find your color code reference sheet. So I'm going to click on download, and it will take me right to that sheet. So you'll be able to just print this off, and you can either give this to each of the students, or you can keep it for yourself and kind of let the students figure out what each code means. You'll see we have the list of the different codes, and then if you scroll down a little, the definition of each of the codes. So if you're confused about what one code might do, then the little description's a little further. I'm going to go ahead and go back out of there. And then I'll show you the calibration tip sheet right here. That is also another good tip sheet going over the calibration process that I showed you earlier. So if you forget any of the steps, you can go ahead, come back here, and then download this, and it will show you how to do the calibration. So that is all that I was going to show you. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Cassandra. So let me give her the screen. Just give me 1 second. All right, perfect. So it's going to come on over to Cassandra now.
Hi again, everyone. So this morning is when we uploaded our new color codes basic training. Basic training is basically just teaching the students a lot of what Tara just showed you about how to draw lines and color codes the robot can read so that they can get into more advanced computer science concepts, and so that they can even do the subject integrated lessons that you might want to do with them with math and literature. There are all kinds of possibilities. So we just want to make sure they become experts in color coding so that they're spending time on their lessons and not having to learn how to draw and whatnot. And what they're doing in the basic training is coding in and of itself. It's a good illustration of what codes are and how to program a robot. Some of you may be familiar with our old color codes basic training. That's still searchable if you want to look at those lessons. But these are the ones that we're now recommending to teach your students. The main difference between that one and this one is that we now have 3 separate lesson series for different age groups. So the K-2 students, grades 3 to 5, and grades 6 to 8 are all going to have their own versions. And they're going to be a different amount of lessons. So the main thing that differentiates all of those versions is the kindergarten is 4 lessons, 3 to 5 is 3 lessons, and the 6 to 8 is 2 lessons. It's all basically the same content. All that is different is spending more time on it for the younger students, and we even have some additional supplemental handouts in parts that we found they need a little bit of extra support. So I think I'm ready to get into it. Where can we find these lessons? I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to turn my camera off. Is my screen already shared?
Yeah, I see
okay, it's been there. Okay, so we're going back to the Ozobot homepage, going to Educators, and then go to the lesson library. Since these are introductory, part of one of our basic training series, they're actually right in the banner for you. So you don't have to go searching around. Color Codes Basic Training is right here. The Ozobot Basic Training, the other way to program Ozobot that Tara was talking about, is right here. But we are going to click on Color Codes Basic Training, and that's where you're going to see the different age groups that I was talking about. On first glance, these Mission to Mars and Neptune might seem a little out of place, but you'll see that those are actually the final activity for these lessons. It's a game that just basically allows them to practice their color codes in a way that it allows for additional practice and also kind of normalizes making mistakes and testing out Ozobot's limits, seeing what it can do and can't do. So to explain the basic structure of all of them, I'm going to go to the K-2 because that has all of the information that the other ones have and just a little bit more. So you'll see here when I click on the page that here is it's 4 lessons, and then each of the ones that you click on, each of the versions, is going to have these attachments. One is the Educator version. So that's going to tell you everything that you need to do and say and explain to your students. We'll click on that in a little bit. And then there are student handouts. So these are going to go along with your lesson, and I'll just click on it now. It's basically just full page printouts of the activities that go along with the concepts you're going to be teaching them about. So you'll see a little bit, whoops. And then here in download lesson docs, that's just basically a merged document with both the educator version and the handouts in one. So we'll get to the structure. So you'll see when you click on the educator version, there's a page that introduces the series, tells you how many lessons it is. Since there are multiple lessons in the document, in the series, we did include a table of contents so that you can more easily find the page that you're looking for. Academic standards. So each lesson is also going to have a before you begin. So that just gives you information and materials that you need to complete the basic training. Some helpful hints about the lesson, for example, the handouts that I just showed you, you're going to see those in the lesson too, but they're just little previews for you to see what your students are working on while you're explaining it to them. Let's see. Some more information you can read through a little later. First, when we actually get into the lesson, you'll find a quick guide. This is, there's one for each lesson. It's basically a reference for you, an abbreviated version of the full lesson, so that when you're teaching, if you're already familiar with the concepts, you can just have this in your hand and reference it every so often instead of having to have multiple pages. We tried to keep them all to one page, but since the 6 to 8 version has so many topics in one, we actually had to make it 2, but they're much shorter than the regular lesson. So as we get into the actual full lesson, you'll see that we have the materials, preparation that you'll need to get started. Then we get into the subjects. Each lesson is going to begin with introducing robots and introducing Ozobot. And then here we come upon our first handout preview. These gray boxes, these are what I like to call action boxes. So this is the handout that your students will be seeing. And then here is everything that you need to do, explain. Sometimes there are questions that you can ask to prompt discussion, but all of that is right there. We tried to make it so that it's basically, you could just read it and then have that be your full, you can read it and explain everything to your students without even having to really think about it on your own. But of course, you're welcome to amend it for whatever your students might need. So then we go into more with the drawing the lines. So these previous 2 handouts teach them basically how to draw the thickness of the lines, make sure that on corners and curves it stays thick enough for the robot to follow, talks about the line sensors and why they need to be that thick. And so it just also goes into a little bit about how the robot works. This particular lesson ends with an activity. So after all the lessons, we wanted to do an activity that helps them solidify their skills in a fun way. That varies a little bit amongst the versions, but each one will end with an activity. Here we come across lesson 2, same quick guide. And then this is going to introduce color codes. They're going to start by drawing them in boxes just to get an idea of the size that the color codes need to be. And then they'll just be introduced gradually to what the different color codes mean. This is talking about the symmetric codes, which Tara mentioned earlier, where if it goes reads it one way, it might mean another thing. And then if it's a code that isn't like blue, green, blue, and it's more of a tornado code like she showed, it'll mean something different on the way back. Here we have an activity that is one of the ones I was talking about that's specific to kindergarten. It's an extra handout just to give them a little more practice with those symmetric codes. So those aren't in the other versions, but you could, if you thought your students might be able to benefit, you could go to this lesson and download that handout as well. We then start introducing Ozobot's random decision making at intersections. Some of you might know about that already. Some of you might not know yet. Basically, it's just that unless Ozobot receives an instruction before an intersection, it'll choose randomly. So if you want it to go a specific way, you'll need to tell it what to do before the intersection. Here's another just kindergarten specific one that gives them a little bit of practice on seeing from the robot's point of view. So when they're writing a color code, it's not always left to right. It's not their perspective. They need to take into account which direction the robot will be facing to be able to properly tell it where they want it to go. Here's our activity that it ends with, just a little more practice with the directions and the codes. And then the final lesson for all of the versions is free drawing color codes. So they're going to have a little bit of time to, or a little bit of free drawing practice where they're drawing in between the black lines, their own color codes, practicing and using it without boxes. Then we have it's a worksheet that is a driver's test is what I'm calling it, because the activity they're going to do after this is the journey to Mars. So basically you give this to them, tell them the rules of the road, basically just where to put color codes on a line so that Ozobot can read them. You'll see that it doesn't work on curves or in the middle of intersections, just because you need to have that straight black line on either side in order for it to properly read it. So they learn about that, they get their little driver's license, and then they play the game in groups. So that is just a conglomeration of everything they've learned before, with drawing lines, where to place the codes on a line, drawing the color codes, and basically by the end, ideally, they will be experts. So this is Mission to Mars, and then Mission to Neptune is just a little more challenging for the older grades. So you'll see, I won't go through all of the other, I won't go through all of the other lessons, but I'll just take you to their pages to show you the different, so this is 3 lessons again, and this is 2 lessons. So yeah, you'll want to read through the whole lesson to get all of the information. I'm sure this was already a lot to take in as it is. So I guess one thing I want to mention about the handouts is you'll print those about 1 per student. We recommend just giving each student the opportunity to practice amply on their own. So even if you're sharing robots, I still recommend that you give each student their own handout. Let's see, and again, the 6 to 8 and the 3 to 5 versions are the same lessons, or sorry, are the same concepts, but in just a different amount of lessons. So let me see. Anything else? So again, just these are recommended pacing, recommended handouts that accompany it. Feel free to go through and tailor it to your own class, borrow from other lessons, and finally, I guess just be on the lookout for that Ozobot basic training that will get you started with coding with the block-based editor that we have. Yes, should I show the lesson library?
Yeah, let's go.
So we have a few minutes until questions. So I do, for those of you who aren't familiar with the lesson library, basically the page that I led you to before where you find these, you can actually go down if my computer loads, and you can find lessons by searching or just browsing. We have some different categories. You can look for by grade. We have, and I also wanted to, this is a good opportunity to call out our teachers who send in lessons. Many educators have sent us lessons, and so we post them here. It's really great to see what people are using it for in the classroom, and then sharing and having them share it with us and other educators. So that's a great resource as well.
Also, if you could scroll back up to the top, I've been talking to some educators lately, and they don't realize that we do have the search bar at the top, but you don't have to type anything in there. You can actually click on that little blue button that says search right there, and that will take you to a page where you can actually filter the different lessons as well. So you can filter it by grade level, subject, or topic. Robot is another really important one because there are some lessons that only work with Bit and they won't work with Evo, and vice versa. So if you're using Bit, you want to make sure that you click on Bit specifically. If you're using Evo, click on Evo. I do want to point out that both Evo and Bit work with the markers and the color codes. They also both work with Ozobot. So whichever bot that you have, you can still do lessons with markers and paper and Ozobot. And then we do have the lesson types, the author. So you'll see right there, you can choose to just get lessons that we've created here at Ozobot, or the community would be teacher-generated content as well, and then time and published. So yeah, there's a lot of different folders that you can choose between.
And these are clickable so that you can choose more than one. So if you're looking for
K-5.
Yeah, exactly. Something that incorporates 2 different subjects. You can click more than one box. And I just realized my screen's been on the whole time.
It's fine. We like looking at you. All right, so we'll go ahead and we can open up questions now. If anyone has anything at all, anything we were talking about during the webinar, anything that we didn't touch on during the webinar, we can go ahead and answer that for you. So just go ahead and type it in that question section in the control panel. And I'm just going to pop this out so I can see the questions a little better. Somebody said they love just hitting the search button and getting all of the choices based on grade level. That's good to hear. Okay. Do you sell the stickers and headpieces for the Ozobot separately? My students would love to design their own Ozobots. Lucky for you, we do. We just released our new DIY packs, I believe. So I think you're still showing on your screen. If you go to the Ozobot store at ozobot.com, and then you click, there we go.
Do you want me to show?
Yeah. And then you click on the shop section, I believe. Okay, and we go to accessories now. You'll see a list of all the accessories that we have. So if we scroll down, so I want to point out, we do have the color code stickers now available. So those are stickers that are great, especially for the younger students who are having a little bit harder time drawing the color codes the exact size and shape that they need to be for those about to recognize them. You can just use the color code stickers. So that's another great accessory that we have somewhat just released. And then we have the DIY pack for the Evo and the Bit. So you'll see that comes with skins and then stickers and little pop-ups that you can put on top of them. Another really cool accessory that we've also released is our all black marker set. So we did listen to what you guys had to say, and I know that drawing the black lines was using up the black marker a lot faster than the colored markers. So we created an all black marker box set for you, so that hopefully helps solve some of your issues with the black running out too fast. So that's all of the accessories that we offer right there. And then you can always reach out to us to get those educator discounts when purchasing for the classrooms. Okay. Somebody said that they were having issues searching when they clicked on the different filters. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the search button. Let's see. All right, so I want to do a kindergarten through 5th grade, because I know a lot of you do K-5. And then let's say I want to let's do programming. And then I want to just do Bit. So then I click on the search button. Oops. And all of the lessons pop up right there. So I'm not sure if it might be the I guess network that you're on. Maybe it's not letting you get to that results page. But if you're still having problems, I might try maybe going on your computer at home and seeing if that works. Because if so, then it might just be the classroom or the settings for your school network that's kind of blocking that page to pop up. Okay. Why is calibration necessary? Should it be done every time it is turned on? Do you want to go ahead and?
Sure. Calibration is necessary because the optical sensors, they're sensitive to light and how much light is in the room, how bright white your paper is, how much ink your marker has. So you just want to get it used to the difference between the white and the black paper. It's necessary every time you begin drawing. And it's also necessary if you've been using it with Ozobot and it's been on a screen and you're going back and forth. So you'll just want to calibrate it to the paper after you've been on the digital. And same with digital. If you've been using it on paper, you'll want to calibrate it to your screen, making sure your screen brightness is up to 100%. I always like to say that's something that comes up often. And then yes, every time you start, but you only have to calibrate once if you don't move in between paper and digital.
And someone said, not a question, but we find starting to draw color codes on graph paper helps. So that is a good tip if the students start using the graph paper, then it helps them draw the line a little bit better. And they said, not sure the size, maybe 14. So thank you for that tip. Okay, can you use color pencils to create the codes? No, you cannot. So it's just the washable markers. And then another thing is that we don't recommend the Expo or dry erase markers on whiteboards. And just because they are erasable, the marker can get sucked up into the wheel on the drivetrain of the Ozobot when it's going over that line, and then that will create blockage and buildup in the wheels, and that could lead to issues with the Ozobot even moving forward later on. So we just don't recommend using the dry erase markers.
And it's the same with the colored pencil and the crayons. You might try it, it might work, but that they can still get things into the wheels and into the drivetrain. So that's why it's not recommended mostly.
Okay. I use Bit with my kindergartners. Is Evo as kindergarten friendly? So we do separate, or I guess we put the Evo and Bit are kind of differentiated by grade levels. So we really push Bit for K-4, and then Evo for grades 4+ that are doing more advanced coding concepts. Now, that's not to say that Evo can't be used with kindergarten, because they both work with markers and paper, and they both work with Ozobot. Evo just has a lot more advanced features and functions that might make the teacher have to do a little more hand holding with a younger student that's in like K-4, whereas an older student would be able to pick up on it and not need as much hand holding. So that's why we recommend Evo more for the older grades. But a lot of the schools that are doing K-8 and they just want one robot, they don't want to have to choose between the two, it would be fine to use Evo for the kindergarten as well. We do have a classroom mode on Evo. And this one is on classroom mode, so even when I turn it on, it's not making noise, but Evo does have sound, whereas Bit doesn't. So as you can imagine, 18 of these going off in the classroom at the same time is a little noisy. So we do have the classroom mode option that you can turn on, and then it dims the lights and it turns off the sounds. So that kind of helps with it being so, I don't know, what's the word? Loud and noisy during the classroom session and the disruption. And then the kindergartners or the younger students kind of going crazy because we're just seeing lights and sounds going off everywhere. Okay. There's another tip here. We use 3Doodler to make costumes on their skins. That's a really great thing to point out. I've also heard that educators will use 3D printers and create little, I don't know, pieces to go over the Ozobot. I had one teacher do animal classification, and they had the students come up with their own animal, classify it, and then they had to go to the 3D printer and create the animal or the little skin to go over the Ozobot, and then they had to make their Ozobot interact with all the other animals in the classroom. So that was really cute too. Okay. In the classroom kit, what are the earplug looking things?
Oh, the little marshmallows. If they're little white cylinders, that's actually part of a lesson that we include that uses Evo's proximity sensors. So look in your classroom handouts, and Is it on our classroom kit? I'm sure it's on our classroom kit resources page as well for you to download, but it's basically just a lesson where we gave you all of the materials needed to do it, and you basically just have to program with Ozobot Evo through a course and avoid the marshmallows with the sensors.
Okay. I love that you release activities around different holidays or special events. The Olympics activities were awesome, but they came out just after the Olympics ended. Is it possible to let us know ahead of time when you will be releasing special activities so we can prepare for them?
I would say on our Facebook group, we'll post them as they come in. And then we always send emails. So definitely subscribe to the emails for more than that reason even. We always send those out. We try to do it before holidays, but you should be able to have access to, if you look there, or probably more reliably our email list. How do you get on that?
So you can go to the bottom of any one of the pages on the Educator section, and then if you just scroll all the way to the bottom, it will say subscribe to our newsletter, and then you'll be able to type in your email there, and you'll be part of our newsletter from there on out. Okay, let's see. Can you explain a little more about the difference between Evo and Bit?
Sure. So aside from Bit being recommended for younger elementary and Evo being recommended for 4+, it just has, I guess it's easier to say that Evo has everything that Bit has and a little bit more. So there's Bluetooth, there's those infrared sensors. So that provides a lot of opportunity for programming, being able to program the sensors to do something different than what they're already programmed to do. It has 5 LED lights, which makes for some pretty cool light effects in addition to the top LED. It's a little bigger.
The lights and sounds, it's connected to the
connected. So if a student made a program on Ozobot, they could log into their account, go to their tablet if you have tablets, and then Bluetooth the program instead of waiting for it to upload with the flash loading. And then basically it just has a few more opportunities for more advanced computer science programming. But on with markers and paper, they're pretty much the same.
Okay, so I do have, let me see. So the same question about the search bar. There's another question about that, actually typing it into the search bar. So if I go right here to the search bar and I click on math and then I press enter, all of the lessons with math will pop up. And you asked if we could type in human body. Oops, not human boy. Body. So this lesson pops up. It's not if we don't have a lesson that particularly pertains to something, then it won't pop up. So if you're typing in some other lessons that we just don't cover, then nothing will show up. So I would stick to like general math, science lessons in that search bar. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take off my screen again. Okay, which grade levels are a good starting point for Blockly? Also, how many marker lessons do you recommend before moving on to Blockly?
Well, we actually have Ozobot lessons for all grades. And the reason we're able to start young is because we have in mode 1 of Ozobot, may as well go there.
Oh, I'm on it. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah. So mode 1 is picture-based blocks. So students who can't even read yet can know what they're telling their robot to do by putting together these series of pictures. So you'll see. And if you're unfamiliar with Ozobot, these modes are basically just the higher the mode, the more advanced the concept. So younger kids would be starting out here in mode 1. Yeah. And so
here we go.
And you can see that they can kind of see what they're telling the robot to do. So they're able to just string together the codes. they might need a little more support, or the lines of code, they might need a little more support with calibrating the robot to the screen and uploading it, but people have still experienced a lot of success just teaching them how to do it one time, spending quite a bit of time on it, and then they are able to put together their programs and then do something really simple. So we also have our deconstruction lesson series. Some of you might have seen the webinar on that. If not, they are on our YouTube if you'd like to check it out. But we have a deconstruction lesson that basically just gives program for students of any age, and of course different lessons. It's just we have one for all ages. They have a program that they test out. They see how what they're doing affects the robot, and then they look at the lines of code and they see what was getting it to, for example, the sensors. If something's behind, then it moves forward. So they can actually take that existing program and they can reprogram it to mean something else. And so that's the way that they're kind of introduced to the different coding blocks. And we have one for kindergarten as well. So you can start them pretty young. Examples there.
And let me see. If you used a whiteboard and markers and covered it with a transparency, would that work? I want to say no, because the transparency can catch the light, the overhead lights, and then create a glare. And that's why we also don't recommend laminating all of your sheets. We have had teachers that reached out and said that they laminated their sheets and they had issues. Other teachers said that they have laminated their sheets and it's been fine. So it's not foolproof. It might not work 100% of the time. You could try it and see, just as long as the Ozobot isn't actually going over that line that's created with that marker, so that it's picking up on the actual marker itself.
Just probably won't be as reliable.
Is the webinar being recorded for later offline reviewing? Yes, it is. We always record our webinars and then we post them on our website. So I think you can still see my screen. So right here, when I go to the Educator tab at the top, and I scroll down a little bit, we have our webinars and PD section. This is where all of our past webinars live. And you can come in and see all the different webinars, all the different topics we've covered. It goes back quite a bit. We've done everything from just Ozo Blockly to the deconstruction series that Cassie was just talking about. So right here is the deconstruction. That was a really good webinar, I have to say. I was really excited about it. This one was exciting too, because so these are brand, the deconstruction was brand new, and then this color code basic training is brand new. So it's exciting that these are going to be out there and you guys are getting to use this finally. So definitely check out the deconstruction if you haven't. All right, let's see. You mentioned an Ozobot Facebook page. Is it specific for educators?
Yes, so it is called Ozo Academy, and it is for educators. There are people on there sharing lessons, looking for support, and so it's a great community. I love seeing it happen where people need a lesson for something in particular, and then another educator will share a lesson that they made. So yes, Ozo Academy.
How do you do classroom mode for turning off the sound? Right now, we have to connect the Ozobot to the app, but when you go inside the app and then there's the little option, you clicked on the Ozobot and there's a couple different options. I forget what button it is specifically, but you can go in there, click on that button, and you can dim the lights and the sound, and then there's a little classroom mode option as well.
It's called more info.
It is more info. So when you click on that little Ozobot, there's a couple different options. There's more info. Click on that, and then you'll have the sound, lights, and then classroom mode option in there. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. When is your next level of shape tracer going to be released?
say there's a new level?
I think it might be Ozotown that you're referring to. We're working on Ozotown right now. I'm not sure exactly when that will be released or if we have any updates on that one.
No.
I know it's in the works, as well as level 5 in Ozoblockly. Do you know
that one? I can tell you is okay. I can tell you it's coming out soon. I think I was told May.
Okay.
So very soon.
All right. So we're gonna work on getting that one out for you, and then Ozotown, I'm not sure. You can always email me afterwards, and I can try to find out for you. And then also, if you have any questions after this webinar, anything that we weren't able to get to, go ahead and just email us. You'll be getting a follow-up email from the webinar just showing you the links of everywhere that we have gone to. And then you can just respond back to that and ask your question, and it will go straight to us. Okay. So as a beginner, do not skip on how to draw codes. Kids will just draw and not know why things are not working.
Try to make up a series of, so something actually that is good to know, especially for those of you who don't have Ozobots yet, is the color code sheet that Tara showed is all of the color codes that it's been pre-programmed to know. So you can't just put together any combination of colors and expect it to do something. That would be nice and fun, but they are all predetermined. So yes, and then I do know they'll try to put them on colored lines, on curves. So yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid with the basic training. Just tell them the right way to do it, just to reduce frustration.
Okay. Does the Ozobot work with Ozoblockly when the iPad is in an OtterBox case? I can't seem to load the program I've created. I think
no, because does it have a protector on it? If it has a screen protector on it, then that's probably what's getting in the way. Anything that changes the color even slightly interferes. You'll see there are a lot of different colors, so it needs to know the exact shade that's being flashed into it. Just as a general troubleshooting tip with that also, like I was saying before, screen brightness needs to be all the way up. What else could get in the way?
The lights in the coming through from the windows and overhead, somebody did point that out, thank you. If the screen, say if there was a window behind me, that's also going to create a glare that's coming off of the screen. So if you're finding that you're having issues loading the Ozobot, just kind of maybe turn the computer a little bit away from the window, and then that could help. Okay. There is a question about PD certificate for today's webinar. You can get a certificate if you've watched it live. Sorry for everyone who's rewatching it right now. But if you did watch any webinar live, you can go ahead and email us afterwards, and then we will just verify your attendance and we'll send out a certificate for you. Okay. I do have a tip from a teacher for everybody. She says, if you have Ozobots and have not used them, just dive in. And we have all those resources up for you on the website too. I showed you the quick start guide. It's really easy. It's really fun. You should see the kids' faces light up when they start using it. So yeah, if you don't have them yet and you haven't started using them, we really encourage you to open that box and start playing with them as soon as possible. Okay. So another tip from an educator is to make sure to let the ink dry. That is really good, especially since we're going over the color codes, because especially the younger students, they'll sit there and they'll draw very like dark and for a long time, and then it's really wet and dark, and you're like, oh, let's let this dry for a second, just so that the Ozobot, that the color kind of dries and sets in. And then the Ozobot will be able to read the color properly. Mostly find that with the younger students, but maybe the older students like a little crazy with the markers too. So yeah, just give it a second to dry. All right, so I think that is all I think we answered everyone's questions. If we missed it again, just go back when we have when our email is sent out, just respond back to it, and then we can answer any of the questions that you have. Make sure to reach out to us if you need the PD, and we're always here for you if you have any questions whatsoever, not just about the webinar, but about Ozobots in general. So you can always reach out to us at any time. It's ozoedu@ozobot.com. And do look out for our next webinar. It will be covering Ozobotly. So we'll have some new Ozobotly stuff for you guys. Thank you for joining, and have a good rest of your day.